Alrighty, everyone, we're gonna get started because we have quite a bit here to cover, and I do want to allow a little bit of time for questions. If at any time it becomes a little bit difficult to understand me because of the mask, I am willing to take it off, but we are trying to practice our social distancing and wearing our masks, and share a little bit of updates from the last time that we spoke. The impetus of this meeting is a little bit more of the interim guidelines from the University of Hawaii rather than many changes that have been happening because we are right now on the lag phase of operationalizing some changes for our fall return. But I do want to provide a bit of updates just because things are happening all the time. I want to just begin again, and I hope I do this every time, but I can't thank people enough for the work that you're doing, the planning that's happening, the input that we are getting, and the feedback that we are getting on all of the changes that we're trying to operationalize for our fall return. It is pretty difficult, I must say, to plan for something like a fall return when we're trying to improve on the health and well-being of our employees as well as our students, while maintaining the core of our mission and educating our students and trying to balance ways in which they would benefit through this experience. And so, this is a kudos to everyone because I have heard some interesting stories from other places, and I think that for the most part, we have been managing pretty well, given the current circumstances that we're living. Um, I do want to share a couple of very superficial updates, and then later on, Kay and Mark will chime in a little bit with more detail. But the fall schedule, I want to comment on one of the questions that came in after our last Zoom meeting. I do want to clarify that we're not trying to restrict the information that students know about the changes that are upcoming. It's just that communicating with students about the changes while we're making them is a little bit difficult because we may be making changes in the middle of those communications. Needless to say, over the last week or so, we have been making changes to the schedule and students have been getting notified. And so, just very superficially, we gave students a heads up of the potential schedule changes that may come. And this is really in reference to a face-to-face class moving online or to a hybrid modality, etc. And so the students got a heads up on that. We did get some feedback. Students are appreciative of the information, so I'm glad that we're communicating with them. There are some concerns because when you give a heads up, the first thing that comes to mind is, how is this impacting me? And we weren't quite there yet. At this point, we have been making some of the changes and we have been going, I would say, from easiest change to the more complex changes and sharing that information with the students. Um, we do get some feedback, and the feedback is still, for what it's worth, and I'm not suggesting that we can't do things better because I think that there's always room for improvement. But changing one class and not necessarily suggesting that the others aren't changing does create a little bit of anxiety on the student side. There's also some questions that are generally best answered by the instructor teaching the class. And so it does put us in a little bit of a predicament in trying to answer some of the more unique questions to the courses. I would say that all of these were expected. And I guess if we added all of those things together, the responses have been generally okay, but we still have some room in improving in our communication. And so we are hoping to roll this out and finalize all of the schedule changes. And at that time, open it up to more communication with the students where we could clarify more of what's going on their end. I wanted to share that because I think at the end of last meeting, and it may have been a miscommunication on our part, but we did not want to not share those outcomes with the students. It's just that we wanted to share them at a time where we were a little bit more um, I guess we knew more what was going to happen. Okay. The next thing, and then I'm addressing some of these based on categories of questions as I've been getting them, and so I hope to get most of them, but I do want to get a little bit into the interim guidelines. One of the big questions that is coming about are the expectations on return to work, and this is of course given the guidance that we have gotten from the University of Hawaii. Everyone's doing it a little bit differently. I want to share that from my standpoint, the unit heads are really coordinating a lot of this effort, but I do want to set a little bit of my guidance in as to what the return in fall will look like. I'm not suggesting what tomorrow or next week will look like because we're still building our capacity for our fall return, and I'd rather we focus on the efforts to doing that. But when fall comes around, I do want to ensure that our students, and I'm not saying in the same capacity or level from last year, but that they find our services on campus. And so if I were to be a gambler, I would almost bet on we won't get the same volume of students seeking our services than we ever did before. Especially and later when Kate talks a little bit about the number of classes that are online or hybrid, we're going to have a much smaller volume of students here. But at the same time, and as much as we try to communicate with students, we will have some stragglers that are going to expect some of our services to be open. And so I would want a pretty typical availability in terms of offices, or at the very least, and the way that I want to say it is the human touch is important. We're working on ensuring, the social distancing and the barriers and whatnot to work on our safety. But at the same time, I would want to see some level of normal, not volume wise, but access to the services. That's very nebulous. That's intended more to work with your unit heads and as a group, so that if there are, whether it's a rotating schedule, whether some offices, some folks move to other places to ensure that there's more social distancing, all of those are things that are possibilities, but I wouldn't want to suggest that we could have some services totally remotely, because some students would expect it differently, and we can continue assessing some of this as we roll out in the fall. And so I wanted to share that as expectations. The University of Hawaii did give that guidance that for the month of July, we're basically status quo to what we were in the month of June. And so we're not asking everyone, but there may be some offices that are getting some more volume of work that needs to happen to come back and do that work. And so I wanted to share that coming from me so that you all hear it, and for planning purposes with your unit heads to see where and how that sort of works out in each of your areas. I don't have details on each office, I'm sorry. But I know that through the envisioning team and the different work groups, we're covering some of these topics just to adjust some of our practices to meet all of these expectations. Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about CARES money. And so I've been giving periodic updates on the CARES funding. The CARES funding came in 3 different buckets. The first bucket was for student support, directly for student support. I want to say that while the feds are not necessarily all on the same page and the communication has been a little bit odd, the Title IV eligibility is something that they're hanging their hats on. And so it's not something that we could just distribute to everyone. But given our experience with the first round of CARES distribution, we're looking for a more, I'm going to call it aggressive and generous approach for students moving forward, hopefully to give out and support those students a little bit more generously than we did last time. We're having conversations about this. I think that we're coming very close. Just so that you know, if any of you are familiar with the process, I think that what really snagged us, the amount of money that was given per student was pretty low. And the process the students had to do, while it was simple, it was a process at the end of the day. I think that what we want to do is reduce some of those barriers so that more students will benefit from that CARES money. On the second bucket and third bucket of CARES dollars, we're looking at structural improvements to support a COVID fall return. And so that means technology, that means cleaning supplies, that means any practices that are going to help us facilitate the social distancing, etc. And so we are putting together the resource list. If you would, or if you referred to the interim guidelines from there are going to be things like the hand sanitizers in the classroom, and we're going to have all of these other things, including signage, just to make sure that everyone's aware and that we are trying our best here to facilitate that healthy return in the fall. And so that's where most of the money is going. Secondarily, there are some dollars that that the system is going to utilize to improve some bigger IT things that, if you ask me, it's not in my language, so it's difficult for me to address. But it's things like digital storage in a time of a lot of online. So we may reach capacities, and so they're building on that capacity. So some of the monies are going to go for that. And then we're going to have other opportunities to think of other ways in which we can continue supporting students and trying to maintain, the COVID-19 aware return. Okay. Last, before I get into interim guidelines, is just a quick overview of enrollment. For the summer, we are up. But some of this uptick in summer enrollment is due to the sidestep or something. Next Steps program, which is supporting the high school students, the DOE 2020 grads that were impacted by this COVID-19, and it's providing some courses over the current summer, and hopefully we could pick up some of that enrollment and carry them on. However, we do know that some of the students that are currently in our summer classes are students that are bound to go to Maui, Manoa, and everywhere else. There is more money to support those students, and so between Hawaii Foundation and a couple of other larger organizations, they built up a pretty hefty amount of dollars that are going to come in as scholarships to those students, but they're not restricted to staying here in Hawaii. Although I think that COVID is going to cause that restriction to many of them. So we're hoping that that'll help build up, because right now we are dipping, or we are lower in our fall enrollment. We're down by close to 15%. And that actually is a very important number, because it's on our typical fall enrollment, which is the biggest number we typically have. And so that 15% hurts the most. In part, again, and I keep saying this in our periodic meetings, early college, a lot of it is not there yet. We were waiting on what the DOE was doing. The DOE has provided some guidance. And so for what it's worth, while it's not 100% this way, it is going to be close to it, that a lot of the early college is going to happen through online. And so hopefully we'll be able to build up on that enrollment, but we're still looking for other strategies. We're looking for any marketing that we can do, system-wide, to promote the students. And so I've been hearing a lot more on radio. I've been seeing a lot more on TV, and that's really good. And I think that for a COVID-19 period, where our enrollment's probably pretty stable, but it would be nice to have some normal fall enrollment, if at all achievable. Now, the reason I wanted to have this meeting and share with all of you is because of the email that came out last week on the interim guidelines from the University of Hawaii. And the reason that I wanted to bring that up is because I hope that you probably realize that most of that aligns with everything that we've been doing. There are just some nuggets of information that are now informing some new steps that we need to take in order for us to be in alignment with that system set of guidelines. We have been working with similar guidelines, and one of the questions that came up in the links questions is why couldn't UH come up with more structured guidelines why each campus is generating their own plans? Well, we do have some nuances and some uniqueness, but I want to say that the biggest cause for every campus having its own, and maybe not so much in the island of Oahu, but it's because every mayor has had their own version of the proclamations that set expectations. And so because of that, it makes it really difficult to have a blanket statement or a blanket modality. For the most part, we're kind of aligned. But now we're going to be able to inform some of these on our own. I will also say that um, structurally, the campuses look very different, and some of these can be implemented in a pretty different way. And what I'm trying to suggest here is, for instance, um, the operationalizing the application or the web-based questionnaire and how we would manage that when fall rolls out, and as to whether employees or students have completed that questionnaire to gain access to the campus. This is something that still needs a little bit more sharpening in terms of what the plans will look like.
Okay.
Was that okay? Um, and so we're putting together more of these plans and having more localized conversations, because some of this, while it may have been an idea that had been percolating along the ways, it wasn't until we got the guidelines that we really knew to move forward. So let me just briefly go over a couple of things that I think are different from the last time I spoke. Number one is, and this is not different, it just reinforces, if you're sick, having any symptoms, living in a house with someone that's sick or having any symptoms or anything like that, don't come to campus. And it is best that you go to seek your physician and follow their guidance. I actually took a contact tracing course, and so I kind of have an idea of what goes on. And that is, depending on your circumstances, you'll be asked to take a test. Depending on the outcomes, you may be asked to do a couple of things. In any case, we do want to restrict the risk that we put ourselves in. And so if you have any of these symptoms or anyone in your immediate family, or you're contacted by the Department of Health to tell you that you have been in contact with someone that's COVID positive, for all of these reasons, you should stay home. Okay? That reinforces what we've been saying, but this outlines it with more detail. What we don't have yet is our reporting procedure for leeward. We are working on this, and as soon as we have it, we will blast it out. All that this is, and I want to make sure that I say this as clearly as I can. While we want to maintain safety on campus, we are also legally required to maintain HIPAA. And so, whereas we may know someone that's tested positive, there are protocols in the communication layout. And so people are informed, organizations are informed on a need to know basis so that we don't disclose critical information on individuals. And so when we put this process together for leeward, we will share it. But in the interim, if you or anyone that you know is experiencing the symptoms, just work with your supervisor and make sure that it gets, through your supervisors to us. Really, the Department of Health is the one that's doing the muscle work here. But for communication purposes, we want to be aware, but we don't need to know all of the details. Yeah, like everyone, we will ask the questions that are pertinent to make sure that we're not violating any HIPAA. I was gonna say FERPA. And so we will work on that, and that's a promise that we will send it out. What that means, we will also be assigning an individual on campus that's going to be the officer for this purpose. And what that means is that information goes to this individual, and they would know the deeper protocol for connecting with Department of Health and all of these other organizations, so that we could continue to follow up there. Face coverings. The one change that I would say has happened is everyone, so students, visitors, employees, are required to wear facial coverings on site when interacting in person. Everyone is expected to wear face coverings when indoors, as well as where physical distancing is not possible. Employee students are not required to wear facial coverings while working or studying in isolation. And so again, this is just a suggestion that before we weren't in a position where students were expected to wear the masks in the classroom. We are in that position now, and that's provided in the interim guidelines. I just want to remind us all that interim means that things change, but I'm hopeful that this is as solid as it's only going to get more solid. Next, reporting, monitoring, and screening. The University of Hawaii is coming up with an application, a web-based application that you could enter either through the internet or through a smart device, and it will have a short questionnaire that suggests that you have been tracking your own health indicators, that you don't, I don't know the exact questions, so I can't really speak to them, but I'm assuming I haven't had a fever, I'm not coughing, I don't have shortness of breath, blah, 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 blah. And so in completing this app, if you answered no to all of the questions, again, assumptions, it will basically say that you now have access to the campus. The guidelines speak to you will not gain access to the campus unless you complete this questionnaire. Depending on the answers that you gave to the questionnaire is going to tell you seek medical help or don't come to campus. And so this is something that's new to us. We have to work a way of operationalizing that locally so that we could manage that process. But the idea here is through generating more awareness. We want all of us as employees as well as students practicing this safe practice of documenting our well-being, and not coming to campus if there's any indicator that we may be COVID positive. And so that's relatively new. We will continue working on the details on how this is operationalized, and then we'll share it with everyone. So that's that. We also have some trainings that are going to happen. The guidelines indicated that we are going to make available trainings. And then this again is not suggesting that we're going to train everyone to be a contact tracer, but rather a suggestion, and this is going to sound really childish and repetitive, but wear a facial covering, wash your hands, etc. And best practices when indoors, in a classroom, how to manage certain circumstances. And so that's going to be part of training that we're going to develop. We're also, if you've been on campus, you're not seeing this yet, but again, a lot of this has been pending a lot of conversations and planning, but there will be signage all over campus reinforcing on these best practices, reinforcing on, wash your hands and keeping your social distance. There may be indicators for, this is 6 foot apart from each other, etc. Bringing in physical barriers, that's another consideration. And so ultimately, we are still in the process of assessing for offices, not necessarily classrooms, how we can coordinate organizing that so that we don't have multiple individuals in a space that's too tight. And so there'll be some shifts, there'll be some recommendations, and we're continuing to address these. But for the most part, like I said, most of this are things that we've known for a while. It's just working our way to operationalizing them. We're still in the planning stages, but there are things that are already happening. Okay. And so with that, I am going to first punt it over to Mark to talk a little bit about, and budget and
all the good news. Thank you, Chancellor. If you cannot hear me, let me know, or let someone know, yell at us, okay? And I'll try to use my classroom voice. All right. What do we know about the budget, right? It's still little by little, things are getting clarified, but so far it's very little that's been clarified. But I think we know enough as to communicate with you sort of what to expect. And I don't think this will come as any surprise because it's happening all over the state and actually in all of higher education. The university is working on budget scenario reduction exercises. What we can tell you is that we can probably expect to have a double-digit percentage decrease in our general funds. And the tuition side is entirely up to us and our students. Right now, as Carlos mentioned, we're down in our headcount about 15%. So that's also another double-digit percentage reduction. So if it ends up that that's sort of where we find ourselves, and we won't know that still for a few more weeks, we're talking millions of dollars for our campus alone in budget reductions, okay? So just that's as far as we know right now. We're working on different exercises that if it's a cut of this magnitude, what's that dollar value? If it's a cut of a different magnitude, then what is that dollar value? And so as soon as we have some clarity on that, I'm sure Carlos and us will convey that information to everyone. About a month ago, we had a Zoom meeting with the campus where I informed everyone that there was a piece of legislation that swept all the general fund vacant positions from the University of Hawaii campuses. And in that Zoom, we had a chart that showed that the community colleges had 232 vacant positions that were swept from us. We do know that it's not that number is not going to happen. So we're going to have a few positions less than that swept. And it looks like the number is going to be around 180 to 181. We're working on trying to get all the details, the finalized list of positions. There's some reconciliation that is going on between the university and the state legislature about the totals, the final totals for how many actual positions that were swept as part of the final legislation. But it sounds like it's going to be in that 180 to 181 level. Leeward had, out of that 232, as you'll recall, Leeward had 35 vacant positions that were subject to that legislation. So we don't know for sure exactly what our final numbers are, okay? And finally, just want to stress the importance that given that budget reductions, significant budget reductions are likely, that we need to delay all major expenses that you might have planned for this fiscal year. What we do know is that the travel freeze will still be in place for the foreseeable future. We need to take a very conservative approach in our spending. Any COVID-19 related expenses, please route them if you have some that you would like consideration given. Carlos mentioned we do have the CARES funding pot. And so send them to myself and Cecilia, and we'll review those expenses to see if they qualify for the CARES funding. So we're very open to seeing that. So if there are things that you're buying from technology or supplies that are COVID related, then please send them to us. Another thing on spending, the hiring freeze, which is still in place, and we don't know when that hiring freeze will be lifted, does not apply to students. But I would caution you that if we have these significant budget reductions, then we're going to hit your operating budget, and those operating funds do fund student help, right? So we need to be careful about extending ourselves too much in the way of student help for the coming year until we sort of have more clarity on the budget. So just a point of, a cautionary point, if you will. And the last thing I'd mention is that the hiring freeze does not apply to grant-funded positions. Grant-funded positions are excluded from the hiring freeze, so we can continue. If you have a grant and that's been funded by an external sponsor, then we can certainly fill your positions and that kind of thing. So the hiring freeze does not apply to grant monies. Okay. And the last thing I'd like to mention is that there are some salary increases being processed. So on July 1st, our UPW workers will receive a salary increase that was approved and funded. And that's the important point, funded. So UPW, that's mostly the boots on the ground people in our operations and maintenance unit. They have a salary increase that went into effect July 1st, and our 11-month faculty have a salary increase that went into effect July 1st. That was approved and funded, as well as the 9-month faculty salary increase that takes effect the 1st of August. Okay. I'm sure your unions are keeping everyone informed of that. Okay, that's all I have from a budget standpoint. So,
Thanks, Mark.
Yep.
And then for updates from the academic side, Kay?
Hi, everybody. Hope you had a great 4th of July weekend. And let me talk about a couple of questions that came in through the chat. Someone asked about the veterans C19 attribute. If the course is an in-person or hybrid class, they do not need the designation because that is an acceptable class. If it changed from in-person or hybrid to an online class, whether it's online sync or online async, those classes will be designated C19 because originally it was permitted. So we want to make sure our veterans have that same ability to choose those classes, even though because of COVID-19, we had to make the change. So our military should be fine if it was not impacted, if it was original face-to-face or hybrid. It does not need a designation, but it's okay for the veterans to choose for their allowances, okay? So then another question had to do with DPCs. Someone asked if they have to come to campus to review the different dossiers. I think that's a conversation that each division should have with their faculty, because you are the ones who monitor that DPC process. I will need to find out, because I know there are a lot of you who have chosen to submit electronically. If it is a tenure and promotion that is being submitted electronically, I will find out if the DPC has access to it. I do not know the answer, but I will let you know. If it's a contract renewal, there is no electronic process available for that submission. So that would need to be discussed with your individual DPC. At our next division chair meeting, which will be next week, the division chairs can also discuss this process. But as you know, each division has their own DPC rules that are accepted, approved by your faculty and sent through admin to UPA. So that is your process. So I think that you will probably have to make that decision as a division. But I will find out as much as I can about that. Another question asked about the availability page, the hybrid verbiage. And students are confused, and I don't blame them. We have been working with the division chairs and the division secretaries, who are the schedulers, to review each section. So we started with online sync, and those are classes totally online. There's a component like Zoom that they meet on a certain day, certain time, and it's all done online. Those courses have been identified. They have been changed within this last week. Online async, or online with unscheduled meetings, has also been completed. Janelle O'Shea, our banner specialist, has spent the last 2 weekends working on this conversion. If it was originally scheduled, she doesn't touch it. But a lot of our classes have changed. She has been making those changes on those 2 groups of online. They're finished. As she makes changes, she actually downloads the class roster, goes into Banner or wherever she goes for, she does a miracle. She gets all the email addresses, and then when she's completed with a section, she sends out an email to the students advising them that some change might have been made to one or more of their classes. It's not an individual per class, it's just a general announcement. So we ask the students keep on checking, but mainly to be patient. We are almost done. The division secretaries have our last group, the e-modality, to be inputting this week. Janelle is finishing up face-to-face. She adds any new ones. She's doing the D modality right now. So when the secretaries, the schedulers, as well as Janelle are done, we will make a general announcement through the different channels on our website, maybe through Student Life, Student Services, and we will let the students know when or how. We're finished with making the changes as a bulk change. However, as you know, there are always changes going up until the first week of school. Teacher changes, room changes, those kind of changes will continue. But generally, we will let them know, and we're shooting for maybe July 15th or 17th to be done. And that's done with the bulk of the changes. So we ask for your patience. We ask that when students email you, you just tell them, we're making the changes. So once we're all done, you will be notified that the changes are finished. Look at your schedule, read the information, and then choose if you need to make any changes. So thank you for your patience. Thank you to our division chairs for working so hard on short timelines, our division secretaries who are your schedulers, and especially Janelle O'Shea, our banner specialist. Thank you to all of you for making this happen. This is the only time we need to go through this exercise, but in September, we start all over again as we look at our spring 2021 schedule. But at least we will know the modes of delivery by already, and you'll have a month to try them out to see, is this a good fit for you and your students? We want to make sure whatever we communicate to our students is as clear as can be, that they know what their schedule is according to the course schedule. They know when to show up, what time to show up, because it's a different ballgame for not only us as faculty and staff, but also for our students. So we want to make sure we do our best job in communicating to our students, and faculty, we need your help a lot. So thank you in advance. I just want to let you know about the different types of changes in our modality. It is very interesting. We'll probably post somewhere the graph that I did. But from April, then we did changes in May to our changes right now. We, on the online sync and async, or online scheduled or unscheduled modes. We have a total of 66% of our classes. About 15 are sync or scheduled meetings, and 50% are online async or unscheduled. So that's a big percentage, and that is helpful as we schedule for social distancing. When we look at our D and E categories, which are hybrid, we're about 22%, and our face-to-face is at 12%. And just to let you know, when we started this, face-to-face was 47%. It's gone down to 12%. Hybrid was 11%. It's now 21%. Online, 41% before, and now it's 66%. So a lot of changes have been done in anticipation that if we have any cases of COVID-19, we might have to shut down. So even if you're totally face-to-face, you have to have that online component ready to go, because if we shut down, we don't have that correspondence type DE deliver type courses. We are expected to adhere to at least a baseline requirements in ACCJC, and that was set up through our own faculty work group who are the DE committee, went through faculty senate for approval and division chairs. We have DE guidelines, baseline guidelines for instruction in the fall. So thank you to all those individuals that also worked hard to get that done. So I think that's it for me.
All right. And so I'll give you guys maybe a couple of minutes if you need to, if you have any specific questions. I may or may not have answers right now, but I do find it really important to keep all of us informed the best that we can. I do want to say, you know, from my personal perspective, coming to Leeward, I am privileged, I feel, working with a group of employees like you all are, because it's been a pretty smooth experience as we've tried to navigate some really challenging times. And I do want to keep reminding all of us that at the deep core of all what we're trying to do here is maybe, just maybe, working with some of our students and helping transition Hawaii's dependency on tourism to something else. I think that we have brilliant faculty and staff, and that we have amazing students that may be able to just change that pattern. And so we'll be looking for opportunities of growth here academically and in other ways to promoting that. But our students need us. And I don't know that we have felt the real rush of the wave yet, because there's still the federal funds that are coming in to support the unemployed. But as those dollars dry up, I think that we will be getting a better feel of what our community mostly needs. And I think that, you know, it's deep in the core of what we do. And so with that, I just want to continue encouraging all of us to work together and be creative, but to thank all of you, because it really is everyone's work that's getting us to push through all of this. Continue working with us with these updates, and if any messages come out of our office, just because we do want to keep everyone informed. And at times we might be, you know, asking for some feedback and input, because we do want to inform where we're going. And so with that, I don't know, Kathleen, are there any questions?
The only thing is about students on F1 visas that may be asked to leave the country if their classes are all online.
Actually, Jim Goodman and I had a talk with Aya, who's in charge of the international office, on Friday. She says the way Leeward codes their classes, our students, even if they take online, they're fine. We just got a notice today, so we will review that, and if there are any changes, we'll let you know, but right now our students are fine. And if Aya's online with us today, she can pop in and give an answer if she'd like.
One more question just came in. Salary increases were mentioned about some group. Is there any word on salary adjustments based on promotion? This would be for faculty.
I don't have an answer. I will inquire. I don't want to misstep here. So I will inquire on this one. Anything else?
No questions. They just all want to see.
Oop.
Just the very last one. Will security be on alert if a student or campus guest refuses to wear a mask?
So that's gonna be part of our plans, and so we're gonna have to try to figure out what we can and cannot do. I think that enforceability is an interesting component of this. We have to have more conversations, more informed conversations before this is all detailed out to that extent. But as of right now, all we know is that we'll have that questionnaire in that app. Everything and then as well as the mask wearing situation, we have the guidelines. We will work on how we could manage that moving forward. So not an immediate answer on that one, sorry. Soon. Okay, so with that, just a final thank you to everyone. Let's keep engaged and informed, and let's keep safe. And I appreciate what everyone is doing. Thank you.
Bye.
You